I think we can go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. We have a lot of really great information to share with you about the Master of Science in Cybersecurity program. We've got some speakers who have some excellent information and perspectives that they want to share. So I think we can go ahead and get started. If we want to go to the next slide. I'll introduce you to the panelists for today. I'll kick things off with introductions since I'm already talking. My name is Victoria Bray. I'm the Associate Director of Enrollment in the Division of Master's Programs, and I work really closely with all of our prospective master's students and applicants to learn more about Brown University and the program. And I'll hand things over to Deborah to continue on with the introductions.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Victoria, and welcome. Welcome to the session. Thank you for coming. I'm Deborah Hurley. I'm the Director of Graduate Studies for the Cybersecurity Master's Program. Also with us today are Tara Leninger, who is the Student Affairs Specialist for the Cybersecurity Master's Program. Unfortunately, Haley Flores, who's one of our current students, notified us at the last moment she wasn't able to make it, so I'm sorry she's not here today. But we do have Avinash Bhavnani, who's here, who is one of our cybersecurity students currently. And please join me in congratulating Avinash in advance because this is his last semester and he'll be graduating in December. So to let you know, so you'll be hearing from him later on. Next slide, please.
Great. So we've got a packed agenda to fill the next hour or so. So we're going to talk at length about the program, answer any questions that you have about the curriculum, the length, the schedule. We'll talk about the application process. And then, of course, we're here to answer your questions. So we're going to use the Q&A feature on your Zoom toolbar to collect questions. We'll answer them throughout the session and then also save time at the end to complete that Q&A. By attending this session, you're also eligible to get an application fee waiver. That application fee waiver is applied automatically to your cybersecurity application. So there's no need to do anything specific. There's no code to enter. You simply won't be prompted for payment when you go to submit your application. And you'll get a follow-up message from us after the event with more information about how that waiver works. So with that being said, I think we can go to the next slide and I will hand things over to Deborah.
All right. Thanks again, Victoria. Next slide, please. Okay, why might you want to study cybersecurity at Brown University? So just to hit a few of the highlights before we start getting into more of the detail. First of all, our program offers a tremendous amount of flexibility. That's how it's designed. The large majority of our students are working full-time. So our curriculum is structured with that in mind. So we have a lot of flexibility to meet the needs of all the various types of students that want to take our master's program. So there are two formats. You can do this program entirely fully online, or you can come to campus and do the program on campus, your choice. We also have two tracks. So there's a computer science track, which is a more technical track. We'll give you more information about that later. And there's a policy track. So you have a choice of tracks. Finally, there are two enrollment periods. We bring students in both for the spring semester and the fall semester. So right now, our applications for spring 2026 opened on July 15th. And then also our applications for fall 2026 opened on September 1. So we may well have people on this call today, on this session, who are thinking of spring 26 and some who might be thinking for fall of 2026. Let me address a question right up front that sometimes comes up. When I speak with potential applicants, they say, well, you know, do I have more likelihood of admission if I apply for one track over the other, or on campus versus all online? That is all entirely, or spring or fall, entirely neutral to us. It doesn't factor at all into admission. So really, it's meant to be flexible to you to organize this program for what suits you currently and your career goals. That's the way it's structured. Okay, next start item here is we have a world-class faculty teaching these courses and conducting research here. So you are taught by Brown faculty. We're here teaching courses in the cybersecurity program, also to other graduate students and undergrads as well. So you know, I won't go on about all our bios for lack of time, but you are welcome to look them up on your own. We have both our online and on-campus students are equal participants in our courses. So just to reassure you, it's not the online students are over somewhere on Neptune and nobody ever hears from them, or they don't hear from anyone. You know, there's a lot of integration. I mean, just to give you a very practical example from one of my own courses going on right now, I have both classroom students and online students. And so they are broken into discussion sections, virtual discussion sections. And so those are mixed. So the students who are in the classroom section and the online section. So their whole entire class, all of this is broken into two. And each of those sections where they're going to do a lot of these interactive discussions throughout the course contain both on-campus students and online students. We also have an interdisciplinary curriculum. So I joke that interdisciplinarity is one of my religions. I'm very devoted to that idea that many of the most current and pressing problems in front of us with respect to cybersecurity cannot be resolved with reference to one discipline alone. Although, engineers may say they've got it, or the lawyers say, we don't need the rest of you, that it's very important to have that interdisciplinary perspective. So all of my colleagues as well were very devoted to that idea. And I'll be talking about that a little bit more later in terms of how we organize the coursework in this program. But the idea here is, and the practice is that every student in the Cybersecurity Master's Program leaves the Master with a solid interdisciplinary grounding in the technical issues, legal issues, policy, and management issues. Finally, both within our own program with our very active and wonderful and engaged alumni of our Cybersecurity Master's Program. Also, too, we are part of the Computer Science Department, which again has a tremendously loyal and engaged and active alumni network. And Brown itself, having been around for a very long time, has a really robust alumni. And once you become part of Brown, you're sort of part of Brown for life. So alumni tend to come back, interact a lot with the university. So all of that provides career opportunities.
Oh, Deborah, it looks like we lost you for a second.
Oh, okay. Did I finish with strong industry partnerships?
Yeah, I think you cut off in the middle of strong industry partnerships.
Okay. Oh, all right. I'm sorry. I don't know what went on. So just to, not to take too much time on this, the Cybersecurity Master's Program as well, our alumni, we have, several hundred alumni at this point. Our, CS department, which you're a part of, our alumni network is very active and engaged, and also Brown writ large, an old and, well-established university, as well as many strong industry partnerships, basically most companies that you could mention. So these are all available to our students. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, and they're excellent for internships and career opportunities. Okay, I'm sorry I cut out briefly. Now on to the next slide, please.
All right, so to speak a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of the programs, the program requires 8 courses for all students, which is standard for American Master's programs. The program, as Deborah mentioned, offers 2 tracks, each of which with its own sort of core focus and each of which with its own requirements. So you will choose a track when you apply, and there are slightly different application requirements pertaining to that track that you choose. There is, of course, some overlap, which will allow you to build on shared knowledge with colleagues in the other track. So we have the computer science track, which, as the name may suggest, has a greater focus on computing. There's going to be a heavy emphasis on Brown's established catalog of technical courses, and we will show you in a moment what those courses might look like. So in the computer science track, there are 3 required courses and 5 electives that you'll select. And as well as computer science, we have the policy track. Policy track has a focus on cybersecurity from more of a management and a law and legal perspective. So this track has greater emphasis on writing, and there's no programming knowledge required as a prerequisite to apply for the policy track. And for this track, there are 4 required courses and 4 electives. So we can go to the next slide and speak about the program length. So the program is designed for you to graduate in 4 semesters, taking 2 courses per semester. That's what's considered full-time for a master's student here at Brown. But it is possible, with the permission of your advisor, to temporarily enroll on a part-time status to try just 1 course in a semester. Above all else, we want you to be successful in the program, so this may be an option to take 1 course a semester in situations where maybe you've just taken on a new full-time job, or maybe you're moving across the country and you have other sort of professional or personal burdens that are kind of weighing on you. So in situations like that, where there are major adjustments that wouldn't allow you to give your all to your studies, part-time enrollment is an option for both tracks. There's also an opportunity for current Brown undergraduates to enroll in the program as fifth-year master's students. This would allow you to enroll in the program and complete it in 1 year. So in this case, you would be able to apply 2 computer science courses that you've already taken towards the master's degree, and then you would enroll in 3 courses for 2 semesters. That's how you would graduate in a year. To be a fifth-year master's student, to complete it in that year-long process, you would need to be in your senior year, and you would need to submit your application for a fifth-year's master's program before May 1st, or before November 1st, maybe more pertinently, if you're graduating this semester and applying for a spring 2026 entry into a fifth-year's master's program. And that's a little bit about the program in detail, but we can go on to the next slide.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's put a little meat on the bones and just walk you through some sample schedules that a student might take. So again, as Tara already mentioned, for the computer science track, we're looking at an example for that track first, then we'll look at the policy track. There are 3 required courses and then 5 elective courses. So as I mentioned, we want to give all of our students, no matter which track they're in, this common interdisciplinary basis across the domain of cybersecurity, across the range of fields within it. So you would take, then they each take, there are courses that are taken by both the computer science track and the policy track that are common. So you're in class with people in both tracks. So here's just a sample for someone who would be starting in spring of 2026, a sample schedule that they might take. So in the spring, their first semester, they might take I won't say CSCI the whole time, I'll just use the number henceforward, but that just stands for that's a computer science course code, 2200, which is cybersecurity law and policy. So that's one of our required courses. They might also take 2660, which is the computer system security course. That's the technical computer security course. Those are 2 of the 3 required courses. We encourage students to take the required courses early and get them under their belts, because then they have the confidence of knowing those are done. The range of elective courses is much bigger, obviously. And so if something's not offered or whatever, they have a bigger choice and things to choose among. So this kind of follows that idea. That's not mandatory. Sometimes a student has a reason to build in another non-required course earlier. So it's not required that you must take all the required courses first, although we do encourage it. And I would say generally students do that, and they find that useful and have the kind of confidence after their first year is like, I've got all my required courses done. Now, what else do I want to take? Then moving on from spring 26, in fall 26, this student is taking 1310, Fundamentals of Computer Systems, and also 2999A, which is our cybersecurity management course with a very long title. So then by the end of that first year, then the 2999A, the management course, is the 3rd required course for this computer science track. So you can see by the end of that first year, they've done all their required courses. 1310 is a prerequisite to some of the electives, not all by any means, but some of them. So if a student wants to go on and take some of those electives, then they would take 1310, usually in their first year like this. Now moving on to the second year with all the required courses done. And these are just examples of popular courses, but there are many more choices. In spring of 27, this student might take 1010, which is Theory of Computation, the next course, Computer Networks, and then finishing up their final semester with Software Security and Exploitation and the Blockchain and Cryptocurrency course. Next slide, please. Okay, for the policy track, here's a sample schedule again for someone starting in the spring semester. So in the spring, they might take 1880, which is Introduction to Computer Security. So you might remember with the last one for the computer science track, the computer security technical course for them had a code 2660. Here, for the policy track, the equivalent is 1880. So it's a computer, we very much believe and practice that the policy track students need to learn about the technology, understand issues connected to the technology. So the person who teaches this course designed a decade ago, and he's taught it since to acclaim. He designed 1880. He's a computer scientist himself, and also though works, very much in the policy domain also. A course that covers the technical knowledge, but is digestible and absorbable by non-technical people. So that's 1880, one of the required courses in the policy track. This student, again, might take 2200, which is Cybersecurity Law and Policy. Again, a required course, also required for the computer science track. Moving on in fall, The student could take 1360, which is Human Factors in Cybersecurity. As Tara had mentioned, there are 3 required courses for the computer science track, 4 required courses for the policy track. This Human Factors in Cybersecurity is the 4th required course in the policy track. As you will know, or if you're just new to cybersecurity, usually the weakest link in the entire chain are the fallible human beings involved. And so this human factor course gets into that, both benign interactors with information systems and who are involved and impact their security, and also malign actors as well. And then finally, the student might take 299A, which you've seen before. That's the 4th required course for the policy track, the 3rd required course for the CS track, which is on cybersecurity management. Having finished then, they've got all their requirements out of the way, then they might go on and choose, and these are again some of the popular courses. In spring of 27, taking cybersecurity and international relations, and also privacy and personal data protection, and then wrapping up their studies in the last semester by taking cybersecurity ethics and computers, freedom and privacy. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, now it's a chance to hear from directly. The thing probably you're most interested in is to hear, and the most exciting part of this presentation is to hear from one of the current students, peer of yours, and about their experiences doing it. So I'm going to turn it over now to Avinash Bhavnani. Avinash, please.
Thanks, Deborah. Hi, everyone. My name is Avinash. I am a Master of Science student here at Brown. I started the program in fall of 2023. At the time, I was working at VMware, so I was both working. So I started the program while I was working and studying at the same time. I will admit it was a little bit of a challenge at first. It took some, I think took about a semester to adjust to doing both, but I think everybody's kind of professional situation is, a little bit different. So, I think that's something you'll kind of have to navigate. Um, I've had a great time in the program so far. I've learned a lot. I've had a chance also to be a TA as well for a class in to Computer Security. My version of the program when I started was only online. We didn't have the on-campus portion for the Cybersecurity Masters. That's a new offering. So I would look into that if I was a student. The online program, though, gave me the flexibility to both work and study at the same time at VMware. So again, I would, if I was applying, I would think about how you want to tailor your experience to your kind of professional goals and situations. But the program has allowed me to do that. And I've learned a lot. I've been able to take classes in a variety of different areas in cybersecurity. I am in the policy track, but I used to be an engineer, in my previous experience, so I didn't feel it was necessary for me to, do another technical degree. So, but again, it depends on your kind of, professional situation. Again, another advantage of the program. So. Yeah, I don't know, Deborah, if there's anything in particular you'd like me to touch on as a student here or about the experience, but yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Avinash. I guess if you could give these potential applicants just one piece of advice about this program, what would it be?
Great question. Let me think about this for a second. Okay. Well, one thing I've learned about cybersecurity a lot is what does security mean in whose context? And I think one thing about this program is it allows you to really focus your studies on what you want to pursue in that realm. So what I mean by security in whose context, I mean like, do you mean this from like a technical perspective, from like a software security and exploitation perspective, like all the way down, like from a cryptography perspective? Is that what you mean? Or do you mean security from like an organizational perspective, from like, the perspective of someone who's trying to design a policy? And do you mean security from, again, like a mathematical, computational, or from like maybe a legal or, philosophical or business reason? And I think this program allows you to tailor your education very specifically towards those. And yeah, I think that's really great and something that you should capitalize on and think about a lot as a student. because yeah, security in whose context, I would say, is one thing that you can really hone in on here.
Right, that's a great piece of advice. Thank you very much for that. Now, Avinash will be available too during the Q&A later on, so you think about any other questions you might want to ask him. All right, thanks again, Avinash. Okay, next slide, please.
Hi, folks. So I want to talk a little bit about the Division of Master's programs and the Center for Master's Student Excellence that we have at Brown. One of the things that really sets Brown University apart from other institutions is that we have dedicated resources for our master's students through the Center for Master's Student Excellence. So we have a staff of folks, many of whom you can see on the screen in front of you, who are dedicated to both the career and professional development and the student life of all of our master's students. So we understand that as a master's student, you're not here with us for as long as an undergraduate student or a PhD candidate might be. We only have you for 1 or 2 years, depending on the program. So we understand it's really important for you to hit the ground running with things like career, professional development, and then student services. So we have a staff of folks who are available to meet one-on-one, to talk about any concerns that you might have in the classroom, support that you might need, as well as that career and professional development piece. We have funding for things like conferences through the Center for Master's Student Excellence. Our team puts on orientation, student events as well. We think it's important for you to socialize outside of your program. So we have both virtual and in-person events that we offer for students that might include talks, speakers that we invite. We do, a monthly yoga class on the green. We partner with a company in Providence to put that on. So really things sort of run the gamut. We just want to make sure that folks are really making the most out of the time that they have with us during their master's program. So if we want to go to the next slide, I will hand it over to Tara to talk more about career and professional development.
Yeah, so to speak about even more of the wealth of resources available to master's students, the Division of Master's and Professional Programs provide a large number of career resources to these master's students. For just a smattering of some examples of some of these programmings that are held on a monthly basis, again, hold both in person and virtually to reach our wide array of master's students. These topics include things like maximizing your resume and your cover letter, optimizing your LinkedIn profile, as well as special topics like salary negotiation, job search strategies, interviewing skills. They also offer a 2-day in-person boot camp to sort of launch your job search. So really a wealth of resources on a monthly basis that you can start utilizing the month you start, and likely you'll be able to utilize and want to utilize until the month you graduate. Something else that's special though is that we at Brown have a career advisor who is specifically dedicated to students in STEM fields in this division. So you can set up individual coaching sessions with them where you can do things like learn more about finding jobs that are best suited to your skills and your interests, and things like doing a mock interview specifically tailored to a position that you're applying to or interested in. So again, just a lot of very individualized and personalized resources that we have available to you. You can see linked, we also have a career site specifically devoted to our master's students, which at any given time holds hundreds of recruiting opportunities for both careers, and this includes internships as well, depending on what your sort of interests and your goals are. If that wasn't enough for you, Brown has a Center for Career Exploration for undergraduate students and master's students, which is even widening your access to career resources. They hold things like alumni panels, career fairs, hosting industry speakers. And by being a master's student here at Brown, you receive lifelong access to Handshake, which is sort of the website by through a lot of these events are hosted and you get messaging from, and that will keep you informed about internship and job opportunities. And kind of like Deborah spoke before, once you're part of the Brown community, you stay a part of the Brown community, and there are lifelong benefits of attending Brown, including the strong alumni network. We have our own alumni networking portal, which allows you to find alumni in your field and even at specific companies. So if you have, a dream job, you may be able to find someone with a connection to Brown who's already working there, and you can have a conversation with them. This is also where our alumni could post jobs or internships of interest, specifically with the goal of recruiting other Brown alumni. Again, it's a really interconnected alumni network with resources like that for you. And even outside of the Master's Programs Division, which we've explored is already hosting so many resources for you, Brown as a whole offers offers a formal mentoring network of alumni and graduate students and has career-specific advisors available to all students. So even if your professional interests are far and wide, someone at Brown is available to speak individually with you about those goals. And we can go to the next slide.
Fantastic, thank you. So I want to dive a little bit more into the application requirements. So if we want to go to the next slide. We have a high-level overview of everything that we're going to ask you to submit as a part of your application. So first, we're going to ask you to submit your transcripts. For the purposes of your application, you can submit unofficial transcripts. However, you will be asked to submit official transcripts by the time you hopefully matriculate at Brown. It's really important to us that we have transcripts from all the institutions that you've attended after secondary school so that we can make sure that you're meeting those prerequisite course requirements. What I see happen a lot of times is a student will transfer. Those transfer credits might not show up, or the grades might not show up on your second school's transcripts. So make sure that you're looking at those unofficial transcripts, making sure that it's clearly outlined whether or not that course coverage is there, and then making sure that if you do have multiple degrees or have attended multiple institutions, that you're submitting transcripts from all of those institutions after high school. Your CV or your resume, which will outline your professional and your academic experience, your personal statement, which we'll talk about in just a moment, as well. We're going to require you to submit 3 letters of recommendation. It's really important to us that you submit all 3 letters of recommendation from folks who can speak to you really specifically and who can speak to your success in the program. A lot of times we'll ask for letters of recommendation, and folks will submit letters of recommendation saying, this person was in the top 10% of my class, but not really have a lot of substantive things to say. It's important to us that the folks who are recommending you, either from industry or from academia, can talk about you personally, can talk about your citizenship in a classroom community, in a professional community, can talk about how successful you'll be in the program, how it'll help meet your goals. We totally understand that this is sort of a very US-centric topic, these letters of recommendation. So I think it's important also, if you're applying from an institution outside of the United States, setting that expectation of what we're looking for in a letter of recommendation when you're requesting those letters. Somebody who can speak to you specifically, how you'll be successful in the program, and then specifically sort of how Brown's cybersecurity program can meet your needs as a student. Application fee, which will be waived for folks who've attended this session. Once again, nothing that you need to do specifically to waive that application fee. We do not require the GRE. However, if you have a degree from outside of the United States, or sorry, not, if you do not speak English as your native language and you have not or will not graduate from an institution where English is the sole language of instruction, we will require you to submit English language proficiency exam scores. And the only 2 tests that you can submit to satisfy that requirement is the TOEFL or the IELTS. Again, that is only for folks who do not speak English as their native language and do not or will not have a degree from an institution where English is the sole language of instruction. Deborah, I'd love to have you weigh in on the application process a little bit more.
Okay, thank you very much, Victoria. So I want you to know we read your applications very closely and carefully. Our admissions committee does. So we really spend a lot of time looking at them. So just 2 points I would highlight to add to what Victoria already said. Your personal statement, that is your big opportunity to speak to us. So really it should be obviously well written, but also to really use that personal statement to tell us about you, to explain why do you want to be at Brown, why cybersecurity. If you already have experience in the field, maybe a couple of examples of things you've done, or if you have an interest in it, what your areas of interest are. If you have any idea of any career aspirations beyond, most people do not at the time they're applying. You can mention that, or specific things you want to go on and try and accomplish in your career, but really use that space to speak directly to us. We read it very closely. Similarly, we pay a lot of attention to your letters of recommendation. So just to, just echo what Victoria said without repeating it, I agree with her. And then also, these should be, if it's a work recommendation, if it should be a supervisor of you, not a teammate or peer. Your academic recommendation should be from professors that you took courses from. And that, again, as much specificity as possible about you and your performance in the class. If you did a particular project or were the leader of something, or had some sort of insight, just specific about you. Thanks, Victoria.
Thank you. So if we want to go to the next slide, A little bit more information about the personal statement, just to echo Deborah's sentiments. It's really important to us that this is treated as sort of a highly polished document. It's the only opportunity that you have to really show us something about yourself, your ability to communicate, the way that sort of you tell your professional story, your interest in the program. You should really talk about Brown cybersecurity programs specifically, like Deborah was just saying. It's an opportunity for us to get to know you, your goals as they pertain to the degree. uh, it's important to follow also the instructions that are given. So shouldn't exceed 800 words. Make sure that you're sort of fitting everything into those parameters. You should describe professional work experience that you've had, sort of weave that story together and how your professional experience has made you a good fit for the program, and then how this program can really help launch you into the next step of your career. So then if we want to go to the next slide. Prerequisite coursework I talked about a little bit earlier when we were talking about the transcript. It's really important that if you're applying to the computer science track, that it's clear that you've met this prerequisite course requirement. The core requirements being an undergrad degree in a STEM or social science discipline with some undergraduate coursework in math that covers calc, discrete math, probability, and statistics. And then also it's important that you have some course coverage in computer science at the undergraduate level, and that should be clear on your transcript when you submit it. So then if we want to go to the next slide, policy track, less specific prerequisites, but still important to note. You need a bachelor's degree in any subject, a statement that summarizes your academic, professional, volunteer experience is optional but encouraged. Also touching on that in your personal statement is going to be really important. And then any additional information that you have about coursework that has additional writing, involves additional writing, we want to know about when we're looking at your application for this program, which also, we can cover in that personal statement as long as we're within the parameters of those 800 words. So then if we want to go to the next slide. I talked about this pretty in depth previously, but I think it bears repeating that one, the GRE is not required for the cybersecurity program. And again, for anybody who does not speak English as their native language and doesn't have a degree, or if you're a current undergraduate will not have a degree from an institution where the sole language of instruction is English, we will need you to submit your TOEFL or IELTS scores in order to be considered for the program. You can see the recommended minimum scores for the tests as well as the school code. So if we want to go to the next slide. Information about scholarships. I have a ton of questions in the chat about funding and scholarships. You're automatically considered for scholarships based off of your application. There are a limited number of scholarships that are available based on merit, really based off of that read by the admissions committee of your application. And then you can see the types of scholarships that we have as well. There are 25% or 50% tuition scholarships. So we can go to the next slide. Deadlines for spring 2026. This is a very screenshotable slide. I'll also provide a link to the program finder page for the program so that you can see all of this information in depth. Important note about the deadlines for spring, they're coming up very quickly. So make sure that if you have any questions that you're following up with us after the session. I also want to note that the deadline for spring or for fall, excuse me, I should say, for cybersecurity, that's going to be February 1st is our priority deadline, and then April 1st is our final deadline. Another important note is the program has two modalities, both an on-campus and an online modality. So when you're applying, make sure that you're paying attention to the deadlines because they might be a little bit different for the spring for folks who are applying, just because it's important to us to make sure that you have enough time for visa processing. And then if you're applying for fall, really as early as you can apply so that we can build in as much time as possible to manage that visa process is going to be really important for folks who are applying from outside of the United States. But like I said, I'm going to drop this link to the program finder page, which outlines all of this information in the chat right now. And then if we want to go to the next slide.
Could I just add something on application deadlines?
Yes, please.
Victoria. So at this point for the spring 2026, our for international on-campus students, our deadline was September 8th or September 15th. Actually, we lengthened it, and that's on our other materials. And then our priority deadline was September 15th, so this week. But we have a regular deadline on November 1 for spring 2026. Sometimes people ask me, do I have better chances with the priority or the regular? Doesn't matter. So don't worry, some people like to apply early, get an answer early, others later on. for spring as well, or for fall 26 admission. As Victoria said, our two deadlines are February 1, 2026, that's our priority deadline, and April 1, 2026. So for international on-campus students coming for fall of 2026, again, those are our deadlines, and you'll have then sufficient time to be able to obtain your visas for entry in fall 26. Thanks.
Thank you, Deborah. All right, so I think we're ready to start to answer some questions in the Q&A. We've got some open questions right now. Question about the policy track. If a student's already completed a computer science undergraduate degree, can they enroll in higher level computer science courses instead of introductory computer science courses?
Yes, so again, we have our set of courses, both required and elective. So if it's, we don't want to make people do stuff over again that they already know how to do. There's no, interest in doing that. So if a student, for example, is in the CS track and instead of taking 2660, which is the technical computer security course, they want to take another course or they can take a more advanced course, then they will demonstrate that to us. And if they do to our satisfaction, then, we would permit them to do that. In addition to sort of our normal curriculum, both our required courses and our range of electives, occasionally have a student come in who has a particular interest in a certain aspect of computer security. Let me just make one up, computer vision. I think we had a student several years ago who had that. So we have a computer vision course. That's not part of our normal cybersecurity curriculum, but it is a course offered in the computer science department. So we permitted that, the students and I take that as one of my courses to count toward my degree, and we permitted him to do that. So there is some, give in that system. The other thing to mention too, because it didn't come up earlier, is the demographics of our students. They range, because people ask about this, it ranges from people who just got out of undergrad, they graduate in May and start with us in September as a graduate student, all the way up, and this has been, because our demographics have been very consistent over the last decade. So this is, cohort to cohort, all the way up to people in their late 50s or early 60s who are usually senior executives and decided that they need to know much more about cybersecurity and decide to get a master's. They might be in financial services or other subjects, and every age in between, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, etc. So it's a real mix of people from a lot of different levels of professional development, which we think really enriches the program for everyone. And then also we have people from every sector, the private sector, government, military, nonprofit, even academics. We've had other professors take our cybersecurity masters from other universities. So again, that really big range of students.
Fantastic. So another question about the computer science track and whether or not any computer specification requirements are going to be shared with folks. Is there like a specific technology that folks need to be aware of before they apply to the program?
No.
Awesome. Uh, Question about notable industry partnerships. So, are there companies, organizations that our students have gotten employment or internships at, or folks that we partner with for industry?
Well, any of the big companies or U.S. government agencies that you could name, we have students who, either are already working there while they're current students and come in with us to get a master's, or, and other students who go out to employment there. So, that's a very broad base of, industry and government. In addition, as a student, I believe Tara mentioned this, you will have access to Brown's alumni database, and that is searchable. So that's something you'll have access to, continually. And so say, for example, you wanted to do an internship at Amazon, or you had, applied and had an interview coming up, you could go into our alumni database and look and see, and this is Brown wide, not just for the Cybersecurity Master's program, look and see, who's currently at Amazon or who had worked at Amazon, and just email them and say, hey, I have this interview coming up. Can I talk to you, or whatever? So all of these kinds of things are very available to you.
Another question about how large is the program? So, what is our sort of average cohort size, or what are we expecting for next year? And then, what is the average class size for the cybersecurity courses?
Right. So first of all, let me just say we do not have a cap. So I get that, we don't have a cap. I mentioned already, we're not assessing people or making decisions based on which track you want to be in or whether you want to be online or on campus. We are looking for bright, motivated people who want to come and study cybersecurity with us. So there's no particular track. So we don't have a limit on the number of students we can bring in. Our typical student body has been about 30 students moving through the program. That's been pretty typical. Having said that, Brown has identified certain master's programs for growth, and cybersecurity is one of them.
Fantastic. If folks have completed the math requirement and gotten credit in high school for AP coursework, would we consider that as fulfilling the prerequisite math requirement for the program?
Well, then I would assume that it would be part of your transcript, your college transcript. In other words, it's come in and you receive that credit for that AP course. So then that would be, part of your college career, essentially. So yes, we would be looking at that. If that's in fulfillment of one of our requirements, then yes.
Forgive me for my lack of industry knowledge, but is CompTIA Security Plus certification considered for cybersecurity masters?
So we do not, yeah, that's fine, Victoria, you did very well. We do not offer certificates or teach strictly to the certificates or certifications. So that is, our program, does, as I say, does not offer certification or teach specifically to the certifications. That being said, many of our students obtain these various certifications. Either they may have some coming in because we have many mid-careers who have different levels of professional experience. They may obtain them while they're students. I hear about that pretty frequently. People are doing that, or when they, after they leave the program. So, our courses are, the material you're learning in our courses then situates you to go on and do these certifications. Just for example, I was in a meeting with a number of our students, and they were talking about the different certifications they've obtained, and some, students who were just coming in were asking questions about that, what they thought were necessary, and then advice on coursework that would help them prepare for certain certifications, including the one you mentioned. Also keep in mind, during that discussion with a number of current students and our new incoming students who just came in the fall, it was during their orientation. Some of the current students said, I'm in this field, I'm a software engineer, and for the kind of work I do, and I already work in cybersecurity, I'm doing this master's, I don't really need any certification. So that's not something I'm pursuing. So again, it's really a matter then, and another one of the current students as well, given her work and her career aspirations, it's not really sort of certification field or one that needs that. Other parts of cybersecurity, absolutely. Employers want to see if you have those certifications. So it's kind of a long answer. Bottom line is we don't teach strictly to them. We don't offer certifications as part of the degree, but the education you receive certainly prepares you to obtain those certifications, and students are doing it, either in between semesters or, I know students, I had one last semester, he was doing a certification while he was taking my course.
Fantastic. Does the program prefer U.S. residents, citizens, or permanent residents for internships and job placements? Has that been sort of your experience working with students, Deborah?
No, not at all. So, in terms of students, first of all, our scholarships are open to any student. So there's no limit on scholarships, the 25 and 50% tuition scholarships we offer. They're not limited only to US citizens and permanent residents or, any student, international students, and whether you're online or on campus. So the scholarships are available to everyone. And then similarly, there's no limit in terms of the type of student, in terms of that kind of thing. Now, one thing is, if in order to be employed at Brown as a TA or teaching assistant or a research assistant, you must be in the United States. That's a general Brown rule. Just to give you a non-cybersecurity example there, we have for our undergrads, we have a study abroad programs. So, a student will study in Spain for a semester. They can't be a TA in a course at Brown while they're abroad because they're not in the United States. So that's just it's a employment rule in the United States that Brown follows.
Fantastic. There's question about transferring credits. Sorry, we're answering these questions in order. And whether or not you can transfer credits into the master's degree program. You can transfer a maximum of one course into our master's degree programs, and that's granted at the discretion of the department. So how that course covers it within the master's degree is really going to be at the program's discretion, but the university-wide, it's a maximum of one course into our master's programs.
Right. Can I comment on that, Victoria?
Please
So,
do.
it doesn't happen often, but occasionally a student will want to try. Again, the limit, as Victoria says, you can transfer one course. So one course from another Master of Science and Cybersecurity program. So occasionally students do that and do want to do that. So we have a very simple process. You come to me, since I'm the Director of Graduate Studies, and you say, hey, I have this course. I'd like to get the credit for it. So rather than having to complete 8 courses at Brown, now you only have to complete 7 to obtain your degree. So then we look at that course and, does it overlap with one of our other courses sufficiently, so that it's something that's really adding to your knowledge base that you're, learning in your degree. And if the answer is yes, then we approve that and you get the transfer credit. So as I've done that with a number of students over recent years.
Fantastic. For the math requirement, if a student doesn't have the math requirement fulfilled at the undergraduate level, how can they fulfill that at this point? Either, could it be through Coursera? Should they plan to take a math class? Or if they don't, will it just fully disqualify them from the program?
This would be for the CS track. That's the one, the policy track does not have a math requirement for the CS track. We do look, again, our admissions committee, we carefully look at your applications. We take it very seriously. It's not like, sort of looking at it at 20,000 feet or whatever. So again, in terms of the CS track, we're looking at the transcript to see that the student has taken coursework that satisfies those basic requirements. And again, the purpose of that is not to weed people out. We are very devoted. If you become a student here, we are amazingly devoted to your successful completion of the degree. So we want to set up the circumstances where you can be successful here and complete the degree. And so we'll look at your transcript to see have you fulfilled the math requirements or CS requirements for the CS track. If you have not done so, in your undergrad, then yes, you may want to take a course. You could take one at your, local community college or somewhere like that. You do want it to be a proper course for which you can then produce a transcript showing that you took the course and what your grade was.
Fantastic. And then another question about about certifications and how they impact your application. This person specifically is looking at the policy track and whether or not a Sec Plus certification would look favorably on their application.
Again, use that application. Anything you can tell us about that you think is relevant, add that. So something like that, I would add, if I were a policy applicant, I would add that. It doesn't take up much space to put that in there. And it just shows again that, kind of your investment in the general field, in your pursuit of, expertise and mastery in the field.
All right, that's all of the questions that we have in the Q&A right now. We've answered quite a few, which is fantastic. I am going to add my contact information into the chat for everybody, but you can see here, if you have any questions about the application process, you can email masters_admissions@brown.edu. I am going to provide my email address as well. And I'm more than happy to put folks in contact with Deborah. She's got advising appointments that are quickly filling up that we would love to have more folks sign up for. So if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to connect anybody on the call with anybody who's been presenting here. But that being said, no more questions in the time I've been speaking. So I think that we can let everyone go with a hearty thanks to the panelists and especially our student talking about the program. But if you have any questions, be in touch. Keep an eye on your email for more upcoming events. We'll delve more into career, professional development, student life in some of our broader sessions. And we'll have more cybersecurity info sessions for you to join as well. So thank you and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.